Hey everyone, it's Mark! And if you couldn't already tell, this video is going to be a little different. As most, if not all of you know, I review every new episode of the Pokemon anime. However, I have been a little behind lately due to my actual job and a variety of other factors, so I'm using this video as a way to hit the reset button. To start fresh, if you will. Not only will this be my recap for Pokémon Horizons episode 37, Fuecoco Turns Bad, episode 38, an SOS from a Tandemaus, and episode 39, Tinkatink and the Hammer of Her Obsessions, which were the 1269th, 1270th, and 1271st episodes of the Pokemon anime, but I want to use these episodes as a jumping off point to discuss Pokemon Horizons in general. I haven't gotten the chance to make a discussion video about this series yet, and I've just been breaking down each individual episode as they've come out. This video is going to be bigger and better, so I'd really appreciate it if you click like. It's free and only takes 1 second. So let's get through each of the 3 most recent episodes of Pokemon Horizons and talk about where this series is at almost 1 year in. The first thing I want to highlight is that Pokemon Horizons seems to have more consistent intros now. Kind of like how most episodes of Journeys began with an explanation of Ash and Go's goals, now we seem to be getting the same Liko narrated intro about who the Rising Voltaglers are and what they're doing. I'm not sure how long this intro is going to last, but there's a chance it may change once they actually arrive in Paldea, although I have no clue how long that's actually going to take. For the time being, the standard intro to every episode does feel reminiscent of Journeys, at least in the sense that it makes each episode feel more episodic, as opposed to each episode rolling from one straight into another, which is how Pokemon Horizons began. Moving on, they set up the plot to the beginning of the episode by having Freed explain to the rest of the crew that they just had a job offer come in. Remember that the Rising Voltaglers are low on money right now, and they are trying to make some extra cash by doing odd jobs. It's a loose narrative thread that was completely ignored in the previous episode, making it feel not very important, and like there are no actual stakes to whether or not they earn any money. The explanation about this job is simple. They just need to move some rocks away from an excavation site. Sounds really easy, so surely there's a catch. The episode cuts to the opening at this point, and usually I would skip this, but since this video is going to be more of a broad overview of Horizons in general, I want to touch on this briefly. When this opening came out, everyone rightly praised it for its amazing animation quality, and I still stand by my take that it's probably the best looking opening in the history of the Pokemon anime. I didn't really have any strong feelings towards the music itself when this first premiered, but now that we're a few months into this being the opening, I've more or less memorized the lyrics and enjoy singing along to the song every time the opening plays. So now its audio is as appealing to me as its visuals, which just makes the opening overall a highlight of watching every episode. I'll probably bring up the opening again at some point later, but let's move on for now as we see our heroes docked in the middle of the desert with Roy and Fuecoco pretending to battle Rayquaza. Roy is squinting for some reason, and he wants Fuecoco to use a new move. The big climax of this episode is ultimately going to be Fuecoco learning a new move, so this scene is setting up 1. Roy wants Fuecoco to learn a new move, and 2. Pokemon can't just learn new moves just like that, as this training session seems to be pretty ineffective. Roy takes a break to talk with Liko, and they figure out that Roy is squinting because of the sun. Murdoch comes by and offers them both sunglasses, but Liko doesn't really want them, so she gives her pair to Fuecoco, and now these two are feeling extra stylish in some shades. Back to this moving a rock storyline, our heroes haven't made any progress thus far. They hear something happening over at the excavation site, and Free decides to go check it out. Throughout this video, I want to talk about the logic of characters leaving the airship, but right now it's pretty straightforward. Free just wants to go check in with the guy he knows who offered them the job. The archaeologist explains how their work has been repeatedly stopped by a group of savage Pokemon, and he shows Freed some damaged machinery to prove his point, claiming that Krokorok and Crocodile are behind this. Their plan is to exterminate these Pokemon, and while Freed doesn't confront the archaeologist about this, you can tell this whole exterminate thing doesn't sit well with him. He checks back in with the rest of the crew, saying that he's going to go investigate what's actually going on here. Liko and Roy immediately volunteer to come with, but Freed says they can't because it's too dangerous. After some begging, Freed relents, and our typical trio are off to the ruins to look for Crocodile and company. Cap immediately senses something and runs away, but in typical Roy fashion, he completely ignores orders and ends up getting split up, and this is far from the first time he's done something like this. Nothing bad actually happens though, as Fuecoco just spots a Pokemon's eyes underneath the sand. This turns out to be a rather mischievous Sandile, which Roy immediately deduces is one of the Pokemon causing the archaeologist issues. He decides to report back to Freed, but instead gets sucked up by the quicksand and is never seen again. Well, that's one way to write a character off the show, and the other two are none the wiser. They just assumed Roy was with them this entire time, but now they realize that's not the case. And I'm now realizing that Roy and Fuecoco didn't just perish, they actually just fell to the bottom of the ruins, and they're not alone. They see the evolved forms of Sandile, but that's not all. There are several eggs and baby Sandile around, so it turns out these ruins are actually a Sandile nest. Yeah, these Pokemon aren't viciously attacking the archaeologists for no reason, they're just trying to protect their family. The mother crocodile also has these feminine eyes, which don't exist in the games because, well, the Pokemon anime is anything but subtle. As the young ones start to cry, the parents begin rhythmically slapping their tails on the ground, and our heroes pick up on the beat. They even join in on the song, blowing their cover and putting the Krokorok on high alert. No battle ensues though, because Roy and Fuecoco's song succeeds in calming down the baby Sandile. The scene changes for a brief moment as the others retrace their steps to where they lost Roy, and Cap leads them down the quicksand. They're greeted by the surreal visual of Roy and Fuecoco leading the other Croc Pokemon in song, complete with sunglasses to fit in with the others. Liko describes Roy as an enigma, and I only point that out because it's a good vocab word that I wish I used more in everyday speech. Back to the musical act going on, and the wild Pokemon are so into it that their singing voices turns into a round attack, and since the whole group knows this move, it's pretty powerful. Freed congratulates Roy on befriending the wild Pokemon, and everyone agrees that these Pokemon aren't really a threat to the archaeologists at all. Of course, right at that second is when those idiots outside start excavating again, and the Sandile do not like that. All of the adult Pokemon spring into self-defense mode and start heading for the surface, and so Roy and Fuecoco chase after them. They never give an explanation at all for how our heroes are able to get out of the ruins, which is clearly a plot hole, but I tend to find these types of things rather insignificant in the grand scheme of things, so I don't mind this kind of writing, because instead we can just focus on the matter at hand, which is the archaeologists trying to exterminate Crocodile and the others. They're clearly some pretty skilled trainers, but no one is listening to Roy's cries to stop. I guess everyone else is too caught up with the action. The two parents are definitely getting caught up in all of this, and they take their rage out on the archaeologist Pokemon and continue rampaging against these threats to their family. Roy wants to do something, but he doesn't know how he can help. It's Fuecoco who does step up in this moment, and he dramatically puts his sunglasses back on because of course he does. Fuecoco tries singing to calm the other Pokemon down, but despite his best efforts, it's just not working. Well, that is until we get the not-so-surprising moment of when one of our protagonists tries to surpass their limits, and this is enough to turn Fuecoco's song into a disarming voice, which not only fulfills Roy's wish of having Fuecoco learn a new move, but it also succeeds in getting the rampaging Pokemon to calm down. Things wrap up pretty quickly after this, with the archaeologists coming to their senses and deciding to stop their excavation so they don't disturb the Sandile nest. These three randomly decide to show up now, of all times, how convenient, and this means that most of the main cast gets to see the outcome of Roy's hard work and dedication, as well as seeing the big rock get removed thanks to the wild Pokemon's round. The archaeologists are happy, and for some reason this doesn't count as the Rising Voltaclers accomplishing their task, and since they didn't get any money out of this, doesn't it kind of invalidate the entire experience? Well, no, it's just meant to be a funny joke, further emphasizing the point I made earlier that the show is not putting any stakes at all behind the narrative of the Rising Voltaclers needing to earn money, which is supposed to be the driving force behind this current arc. Instead, what our heroes got out of this experience was a new move for Fuecoco, and I wanted to dig into this a little because I wondered if this could be a sign at how close Fuecoco is to evolving, but actually Fuecoco doesn't even learn Disarming Voice by level up in the games. And come to think of it, Fuecoco doesn't learn Stomping Tantrum by level up either, so Roy's Fuecoco is quite the interesting moveset. Of course, game logic rarely applies to the Pokemon anime, but if we wanted to shoehorn in some game logic to the situation, we could say that Roy's Fuecoco is more than ready to evolve due to the fact that it has already learned Flamethrower, but that was nearly 20 episodes ago, so clearly the entire theory I had about Fuecoco's moveset telling us anything about his proximity to evolution is completely off base. But at least now we can wait in anticipation to find out which of Fuecoco's 4 moves gets replaced by Disarming Voice. Oh yeah, that's the end of the episode, by the way. No further updates on the Rising Voltacler's progress towards Paldea or anything like that, meaning that this episode was nearly filler, if not for Fuecoco learning a new move. Overall, this episode was fine, but it lacked excitement in my opinion. There were also several small details that left me shaking my head, whether that be Roy and Fuecoco getting separated again, the repetitive plot point of humans incorrectly assuming innocent Pokemon are up to no good, and the intentional disregard for the Rising Voltaclers needing to earn money storyline. But since this episode didn't have any major downsides and it had a few charming moments, I'm giving this episode a 5.5 out of 10 rating. That leads us straight into the preview for the next episode. Wait, why would I even bother with that? I'm literally going to recap this episode right now. So we still get the same intro again, and I checked, this takes 50 seconds at the beginning of the episode, which sounds like a waste of time to me, but I guess in the grand scheme of things, it's only 3.4% of the total broadcast, so I'll move past this nitpick for now. The actual episode picks up in the middle of a rainstorm, and honestly this was a really cool scene in my opinion, even though it was just focusing on the Brave Olivine's movements as it takes shelter in a random forest. In fact, that's probably why it stood out to me so much. It just felt different. It looked awesome, sounded really cool, and immediately got me immersed in the setting. Even details like Orla and the fire-type Pokemon working hard to keep the ship going all added to this amazing scene. The next day, the forest definitely looks like it went through a storm, and even the Rising Voltecler's flag is feeling the effect. Reed has Roy go work with Orla to fix it, but our attention shifts over to Molly, who's performing medical checkups on all the Pokemon on board. Sometimes the anime really nails a random subtle detail, and in this case, let's check out Molly's database of all her patients. Very realistic for a doctor, and the more attention to detail this show has for things like this, the easier it is for me to invest in this fictional world it takes place in. Molly's next patients are Liko and Hatena, and this must be serious because Hatena wanted no part of a Molly checkup just a short few episodes ago. Our resident doctor hypothesizes that Hatena isn't a big fan of storms, which was a nice callback, and Chansey wraps Hatena in a fluffy towel. This cheers Hatena up a little bit, and Liko points out that Hatena and Chansey are kind of similar. Next, the Pokemon from the engine room are here, and they're totally wiped out. It's rare to see Freeze Charizard not raring to go, and in order to treat it, Chansey gives it her egg. Well, I guess it was a good idea because Charizard perks right up after eating it. The next Pokemon is Shuckle, who somehow got a thorn stuck in it. Molly plucks it out, and to finish this treatment, Chansey uses Heal Pulse on Shuckle's injured limb. Hatena is awestruck by this and even starts imitating the move herself. Aside from being absolutely adorable, this moment served the purpose of setting up the second consecutive episode based around a main character's Pokemon learning a new move. Hold that thought though, because Hatena is on the run. Everyone rushes outside to find an injured Pokemon trying to climb aboard the airship, and upon further inspection, it looks like one half of a Tandemaus. That begs the question where the other half could be, and this little one isn't going to wait around and leave that question unanswered, beckoning the others to follow it after getting only the most basic first aid. Liko and Molly don't hesitate, they're going after it, and I have to say, finally we get a logical explanation for who is leaving the airship for the episode. Like, this all made sense. Although it is fair to point out that we're over 10 minutes into the episode at this point. Usually they make the call of who leaves the airship in the first 5 minutes of the episode, but not this time. They eventually end up at the entrance to this cave, which is partially blocked by a big tree. They have to find a way inside to help the wild Pokemon, and their first instinct is to try and push the tree, like that was ever going to work. The solution they come up with is having Spiritomb and Tandemaus clear a bigger entrance. I guess if Hatena was stronger, they could have asked her to move the tree with her psychic powers. Instead, we just end up with Liko calling Molly fat after she still can't make it through the gap. Okay, that didn't actually happen, but seriously, that was a pretty contrived way to make it so only Liko could enter the cave. Well, now that she has entered the cave, let's get ready for a long and arduous journey. Oh wait, it's literally right there. Can you believe it? Well, Molly has already started treating this one. Job done, and I guess the episode is over already. Oh wait, of course it's not, because Tandemaus is still calling out for someone else, and I'm starting to think that maybe this isn't a Tandemaus. Hatena is really feeling it being so close to this wild Pokemon's panic and worry, so Liko suggests that she sit this one out, and Liko runs deeper into the cave without her. Cue a long, dramatic shot of Hatena, and it's clear she's conflicted. After this prolonged shot, she makes her decision and calls out to Chansey. Molly's Pokemon understands and hands over one of her eggs. Wrapping it up in that towel from before, Hatena is all ready to go. Meanwhile, back inside the cave, things have gone from bad to worse as Liko is stuck at a fork in the road. Luckily, her knight in shining armor is here to save the day, and Hatena leads them down the right path. They eventually find their way to where these two are, and Liko is surprised to see two of them. But let me tell you, Liko, Tandemaus evolves into Mousehold at level 25, and there's only a 1% chance that it evolves into a family of 3. So really, this is the least surprising thing ever to see a family of 4. It was a 99% possibility, so there's no need to be overdramatic, Liko. Oh my gosh, the ceiling is falling. Now is the time to be dramatic, everyone. It's a cave-in! Miraculously, everyone survives, although there is the small issue of their way out being blocked by the falling rocks. To make matters worse, the Mousehold are too tired to even eat Chansey's eggs, so now we're screwed. Liko tries to put on a brave face, but deep down she knows things are getting desperate. She thinks back to when Hatena was trying to use Heal Pulse earlier, and well, it's now or never. We need an actual Heal Pulse to save the day. Hatena starts flailing her appendages back and forth, which was pretty funny, but pretty quickly this actually starts working, and for the second straight episode, we get a Pokemon surpassing their limits to learn a new move, and we do get an actual Heal Pulse to save the day as the Mousehold are feeling better than ever. But how is everyone going to get out of here? Well, maybe the others will come and save them, as seemingly the entire airship has piled out to try and move the big tree. And surely you can't be serious right now. Why are they trying to use a giant rope when Charizard could just burn the tree to a crisp, or Metagross could use some psychic powers? Nope, instead we're just going to brute force it, but Captain Pikachu is too fat and is weighing it down. Okay, I already tried to make that joke, and I wonder if Dot is only out here because it's Liko who's stuck in the cave. This team effort pays off, but before they can rush in to find Liko, hold on and look over here, and oh, Liko somehow managed to get out already. Molly rushes over and gives her a hug, which is probably more emotion than we've ever seen out of Molly up to this point in Pokemon Horizons. Anyways, let's find out how Liko managed to get out of the cave, and the answer is, well, thanks to Mousehold. I can honestly say that I was really curious to see how the move Population Bomb would work in the anime, and it ended up being more, I don't know, normal than I thought it would be. I tried to do some research on this one because there were no bombs in sight as this trio clears out a tunnel in no time at all, but the Japanese name for population bomb is actually proliferate, which basically means to reproduce rapidly. And, well, mice are known to proliferate, so it's a fitting move for Mousehold. So where did us idiot English speakers get population bomb from? Well, when I looked it up, I got a ton of results about a book, and the basic premise is about overpopulation, so I guess that kind of works? But not really, because we're using the literal translation and definition of the Japanese name, when really the context behind its original name has more to do with the fact that it can mean mouse mathematics or mouse cut, and that makes a lot more sense than population bomb. So I hope you've enjoyed today's lecture. The episode wraps up back aboard the Brave Olivine, which now has 4 new inhabitants. Yeah, I was kind of surprised that the Mousehold decided to come aboard, but it's certainly a welcome surprise in my book. I mean, Mousehold is one of my favorite new Pokemon from Generation 9, like I definitely put it in my top 5. But now, with the Rising Voltacler's flag repaired, they set off once again as they continue to head towards Paldea. But, I mean, we've seen a lot of Paldean Pokemon lately. I don't really know how they're not in Paldea already. Again, this just further reiterates the point that it feels like no actual progress is being made in this arc, and that's a good way to transition into a broader discussion. Well, before I do that actually, let's put a button on this episode, which I'm giving this episode a 6 out of 10 rating. And really, you'd think I'd give a Hatena-focused episode something even higher, and to be fair, this episode did make me look up Hatena plushes again. Still sold out, by the way, but I will get my very own Hatena one day, I swear. Okay, back to business. And while this episode was about as eventful as the previous episode, I gave this one a higher rating because I feel like it told a more coherent story and paid more attention to detail. I mean, even down to the way the Pokedex was used in this episode, it all just made sense. For example, the Pokedex should have been able to recognize this was a Mousehold all along, but Liko didn't ask it for information about the Pokemon they were looking at. She asked the Pokedex to tell her about Tandemaus, and that's what it did. So there, no plot holes to speak of. Nicely done. And even though these recent episodes haven't really progressed the story that much, I don't think the episodes themselves are bad. We're slowly adding more and more details into the story and adding layers to the characters, to their personalities, and to the dynamics between each character. Kind of like Sun and Moon, honestly, which didn't have a ton of direction at the beginning, and a lot of episodes just kind of felt like they were happening for no reason, but it slowly built up the setting and the characters who existed within that setting. Speaking of which, the next episode is going to accelerate this process because it's pretty eventful, so let's dive into that one right now.
Kanuchan. ゲットしていいかな?
After making note of the intro to each episode being the exact same, they actually switched it up in this episode, so I guess I have egg on my face now. Although, oddly enough, this is the same intro from episode 36 of Horizons, and is only about 40 seconds long, so I'm not sure why they have these similar yet different intros for certain episodes. Maybe it has something to do with which members of production are working on each episode, but that's just a random guess. I never pay attention to that stuff, so I might be totally off base. Regardless, yo Sue, Pokemon trainers, let's go! There is no better way to start off an episode than with Nidothing, and this time it's a live stream. Well, hold that thought actually, because Dot is having some crazy tech issues, which causes the stream to go off air, and Liko rushes to Dot's room as fast as she can. After hearing more loud noises, she decides to open the door, only to immediately shriek and avert her eyes upon seeing Dot halfway out of her Nidothing costume. This stuff never fails to crack me up. Liko is literally trying to protect her own innocence by telling herself that Nidothing is Nidothing. It is not a person in a costume. We skip ahead to later in the day when Freed announces their next stop is going to be Tetsuran Town, and they are specifically going there to stock up on supplies. Wait, so even though they've been struggling to earn money for themselves, now they're going on a shopping spree? Make it make sense, please. Anyways, Dot is desperate for someone to buy her a new mic, but Liko and Roy aren't very tech savvy, so they don't think they can help. Listen, Dot, I've been using the same microphone for the past 4 years, and it's literally one of the cheapest options available on Amazon. You could just order that. Instead, Liko asks Dot if she wants to come with them into town, and obviously she wants no part of that. Her overbearing uncle jumps into Dot's defense pretty quickly too, although I think this just made Dot even more uncomfortable. Well, it's time to head out, and it looks like the Brave Olivine is stationed in a nearby desert, which will be important later. Just as everyone is disembarking the airship, they're surprised when a door opens, and oh my gosh, it's Dot, and she's actually gonna go with them. It's so funny to me that this was dramatic enough to be the big set piece moment right before they played the opening, and that's actually a good way to emphasize how these relatively small steps are actually massive for someone like Dot. Alright, so Tetsuran Town is an industrial city known for its metals, and I guess one of the shops had the piece of tech that Dot was after. They head to the specialty district next, and the others get so excited they all run off without Dot. I just recently turned 26, so does that make me old enough to be able to shake my head at these kids for being awestruck by old school TVs and radios? Kids these days, sheesh. Dot has found something of interest to her, an old microphone that will make for a good prop, but by the time she's actually purchased the thing, Liko and Roy have deserted her. Dot continues to be super relatable for me because I am totally the type of person who overthinks minor social details like not wanting to send the wrong message by calling someone, and we continue to focus on Dot as she hears something going on nearby. The commotion is some random worker getting into a fight with a wild Tinkatink, and this little one was trying to get a hold of some of their iron, and apparently this isn't the first time something like this has happened. But oh, I'll tell you what, super generic worker guy, you have got another thing coming if you think you can push this precious little Tinkatink to tears and get away with it. Tinkatink is so upset that she trips over herself and drops her hammer, and she's surprised when Dot is nice enough to pick it up and give it back to her. Tinkatink then notices Dot's retro microphone that she just bought and immediately naps it and starts pounding it into the shape of a hammer. Dot is initially upset about this, but once she sees how passionate Tinkatink is about this thing, Dot gives it up and is ready to walk away when she hears Liko and Roy. Tinkatink is surprised to see her walk away, and Dot just nonchalantly meets back up with the others without saying much. Tinkatink finishes making her new hammer, and she's so proud of it that she runs off to go show Dot her finished work. Our heroes return to the Brave Olivine, and remember how I called Murdoch overbearing before? Yeah, that checks out. This guy wants to throw a party just because Dot was able to go shopping with her friends. A small detail here in the dialogue is actually a great example of what I was talking about earlier, with Horizons slowly building lots of details into the setting and characters, as Liko and Roy want a curry party because of course they do, but Dot still isn't as big a fan of curry as they are. Like I said, a really minor detail, but it's just a fun addition that works because of what has previously happened in this series, so I wanted to highlight an example of how the writing of Horizons makes us feel closer to the characters, almost like they're our friends too. I wanted to skip over this next part, but then I realized I was at risk of not mentioning Ludlow at all in this video, and I mean I can't just skip one of the Rising Volt Tacklers if I'm trying to have a comprehensive discussion about Horizons. Ludlow's role in the show is weird, and he's usually only seen in transitional scenes like this one where he speaks in proverbs and puns, which I am always slightly amazed makes the translation from Japanese to English so seamlessly. But much like Terapagos yawning right here, I can't help but feel like Ludlow is the least exciting character in the main cast, although that does make the moments when Ludlow actually does step into the action all the more exciting, so I do recognize the role that Ludlow plays. And he stands out because of how big of a contrast there is between he and the other characters. The next scene takes us to the hull of the ship where we get to see the mousehold from the previous episode, and these cute little mice are the perfect victims to scream and run away from whatever ominous figure is towering over them. We don't see what it is in this moment, but surely it's the same Pokemon responsible for whatever was seen digging underneath the sand while the others were boarding the ship. It's time for the mid-episode ad break, and the first eye catch here is the one featuring the wild Pokemon who live aboard the Brave Olivine, including the new edition of Mousehold. And what excited me about this ever-changing eye catch is that I now realize how much more space there is for even more Pokemon to join the party. I mentioned several times before Poltegeist became the first new wild Pokemon to come live aboard the airship that I wanted to see more and more Pokemon added to the ranks, and I can't wait to see what other Pokemon join the family. Speaking of eye catches, the one on the way back from the ad break is Dot Quaxley, and even though the first half of this episode has set things up for a potential Tinkatink capture, I'm glad the anime learned from their past mistakes and didn't spoil their own show by including a Pokemon in an eye catch before it was actually caught. Back into the actual episode though, and we see Orla walking down to the hull so she can use some of the iron that she bought in Tetsuran Town. However, all of that iron has somehow gone missing already, and a very clearly mad Orla starts interrogating her crewmates, promising not to get mad at them, despite the fact that she is already mad. Accusations start flying as Orla tries putting the blame on anyone and everyone, while Dot wonders if Tinkatink could possibly be behind this. Speaking of which, guess who just climbed aboard the ship? And we see Tinkatink rushing around trying to find Dot so she can show off her pink hammer mic. Instead, she just runs straight into muck, and this terrifies poor little Tinkatink, and it becomes clear pretty quickly that this pink blob is a complete scaredy cat. Back downstairs, Dot has found a mysterious hole in the wall, and she deduces that Tinkatink can't be the one behind all of this after all. Inevitably, Dot and Tinkatink do cross paths again, and finally Tinkatink can stop running and crying as she finally gets to show Dot her hammer, and Dot is very impressed. Tinkatink is overflowing with glee, but that's about to change as some other people start walking over. Dot explains to them that Tinkatink is a Pokemon that loves iron. Yeah, that was a bad thing to say, and Murdoch gets pretty suspicious when he hears this. Tinkatink gets scared and runs away, and after doing a lap around the deck of the ship, they chase Tinkatink down into the hull. This was a mistake, as Tinkatink inadvertently cornered herself by running into the others, but thankfully Dot steps in to save her friend. Tinkatink watches on as Dot pleads her innocence, and Freed steps in to confirm that Tinkatink couldn't be the culprit. Our local Pokemon professor explains that the iron was clearly eaten, and Tinkatink doesn't eat iron like that. And when he goes to reveal the actual culprit, he steals a line from the Professor Freed's Pokemon Seminar segment that airs at the end of every episode, which was a really funny Easter egg that got a laugh out of me when I was watching this part. The correct answer for who the culprit is actually announces themselves, as we see an Earthworm getting caught in a trap set by Freed, who is proud of his own work. Earthworm breaks free pretty quickly though, and leaps at everyone in front of it. The rising Voltacklers dodge out of the way, but when Dot yanks Tinkatink to safety, her hammer slips out, and of course, Earthworm catches it and escapes. Earthworm, you better be ready to throw hands if you think you're just gonna get away with stealing cute little Tinkatink's hammer like that. Dot is the first one to react, jumping after Earthworm with Quaxly and Tinkatink right behind her. The others don't have a chance to follow though, as Earthworm cuts the anchor to the ship and causes it to start floating off towards the right. This villainous evildoer starts taunting Dot and the others now, but our hero is ready to fight back. Earthworm is really fast in the sand though, and is able to dodge pretty easily. Freed comes flying in and has Charizard grab a hold of the anchor line, but leaves the job of fighting Earthworm up to Dot. The others are also watching on, but Earthworm is going to make this easy. Dot does her same mental switch that she does when she's getting into Nidothing mode, pulling her hair back from in front of her face and calling for Quaxly to attack, while Tinkatink just starts rushing at Earthworm. It dodges pretty easily, just starts taunting Tinkatink, but it takes caution to avoid the spot in the ground that just got soaked by Quaxly's water gun. Dot immediately recognizes that Earthworm will avoid any wet spots, so she tells Quaxly to start spraying water gun all over the place. This continues until Quaxly has made a ring in the sand, forcing Earthworm to charge straight back at Dot, who planned for this to happen. And wow, what a great shot this is. Quaxly in action, but still with great detail in the background. And whoa, that pound attack really packed a punch. So much of a punch that Earthworm loses control of the hammer, and Dot immediately calls for Tinkatink, and our pink friend isn't running scared anymore. She's determined to get her hammer back, and when she does, oh, you better watch out, Earthworm. Bang! What a hit, although I have no clue what this move might have been. This rocks Earthworm so much that it just digs a hole and runs away, never to be seen again. The others celebrate Dot's victory, and Tinkatink celebrates getting her prized microphone hammer back. The scene changes to sunset, which doesn't really make a lot of logistical sense. It's just purely to create a more stunning visual for the emotional scene that's about to unfold. Liko and Roy apologize to Tinkatink for chasing it earlier, and our heroes say their goodbyes and begin to walk away. You just knew Tinkatink wasn't going to be happy leaving Dot's side, and our introverted hero gets all choked up, wondering what to say. We pause for a moment to see everyone else watching on. Things have really slowed down, and the only music is some soft strings in the background, which highlights the emotion in this scene. Dot, who's too nervous to even face Tinkatink, asks her if she'd like to come with Dot, and this pink blob is on the verge of tears, unable to properly express her own feelings. Luckily, Quaxly knows just what to do, not sure how and why Quaxly has a Pokeball, but Dot isn't going to question that right now. She just picks the Pokeball up and faces Tinkatink. In the most polite way possible, Dot asks Tinkatink if she wants to get caught, and now these are happy tears, as Tinkatink touches the Pokeball with her special microphone hammer, and 3 shakes later, Dot just caught Tinkatink. She sends her new partner back out, and Tinkatink leaps into her new trainer's arms, and the two promise to be good friends in an adorable moment. Everyone else is getting emotional just watching this heartwarming scene, as Murdoch tries to hold back his own tears as he remarks that kids sure grow up quick. With that, the scene slowly fades out, and yo sue, Pokemon trainers! This episode is ending just like it began with another Nidothing livestream. She introduces Tinkatink to all our viewers, and Dot explains that Tinkatink will try to make a hammer out of anything. Just as Tinkatink inadvertently hits the zipper on the Nidothing costume, and oh boy, this could be bad. What a hilarious visual. Frame by frame, this ending was incredible, and the episode ends with Quaxly running in front of the camera to make sure the viewers don't get to see inside Nidothing's costume. I think I made it pretty obvious that I really like Dot's new Tinkatink, and this capture episode was amazing on so many levels, so I'm really happy to be giving this episode an 8.5 out of 10 rating. It's incredible that I've already had one special pink blob in this series that I fell in love with, but now we have another pink blob who also has my heart, and dare I say Dot's Tinkatink has certain qualities reminiscent of another Pokemon I absolutely loved. Beyond just Tinkatink's cuteness overload, this episode had so many other things going for it. First of all, it had some honest-to-goodness battle action, something I think Horizons is lacking overall. And hey, guess what? This episode proved that Cap and Freed can sit on the sidelines and let other people battle. It's actually possible for one of our heroes to face a tough opponent without Cap saving the day. And although battles are usually the biggest way to demonstrate growth in the Pokemon anime, we actually saw so much growth and character development from Dot in this episode outside of just this face-off against Earthworm. Funny that this episode's 8.5 rating is now tied for my favorite episode of Horizons with another episode that also featured Dot capturing a Pokemon and our heroes showing off their battle prowess. While I may not be as sappy about it as Murdoch, it is notable seeing Dot do things like going into town and shopping, or standing up in the face of others, and even making a new friend. I mentioned it earlier, but these aren't exactly big accomplishments for most people, but Horizons has done such a good job of writing Dot's character that we can all recognize just how important these moments are for her, and it's amazing seeing her make all of this progress. I've said before that Dot is my favorite character in all of Pokemon Horizons, and yeah, episodes like this just reinforce that. I think she's the best written character in the series, and I can't wait to see what happens as her story progresses. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that if Tinkatink does end up fully evolving one day, well, let's just say Amethyos Corviknight is in for a world of trouble if it ever tries to attack the Rising Voltacklers again. I also feel like I have to point out how cool it is whenever a main character's Pokemon gets its own personalized accessory. Tinkatink's new microphone hammer kind of reminds me of Ash's Sceptile always having a stick in its mouth, or how Crocodile would always wear sunglasses. It's just these types of things that make Pokemon stand out even more than they already do. And with this episode getting an 8.5 rating, that brings my Horizons average to a 6.96. That number doesn't really mean much without adding context, so let's compare it to my average rating for the first 39 episodes of Pokemon Journeys, which was 6.88. Very similar, and remember that at this point in Pokemon Journeys, Ash had just battled B for the second time, but we hadn't gotten the Darkest Day arc just yet, and maybe instead of comparing the first 39 episodes of two different series, let's take a look at the two chapters we've had in Pokemon Horizons thus far. My average rating for Liko and Roy set off, the first 25 episodes of the series, was 7.28. That's pretty high, and to be honest, it's significantly higher than the Gleam of Terapagos so far, which only has an average of 6.39. What does this mean, though? Has Horizons just gotten worse? I don't think so. I think it's only natural for a series to start off hot, but then slow down as we enter the middle stages. I do think it was a curious choice to have the Rising Voltacklers plow through 3 of Lucius's 6 heroes at a breakneck pace, so these recent episodes can't help but feel slow by comparison. And as I've pointed out throughout this video, the recent storyline of the Rising Voltacklers traveling to Paldea and working to earn money along the way just hasn't really clicked, and that makes this almost feel like a filler arc. But despite that, each of the 3 episodes I've analyzed in this video all had something meaningful happen in them, so I wouldn't call any of these episodes filler. And sure, a big capture episode like episode 39 stands out as far more meaningful than most of the other recent episodes, but I want to reiterate what is probably my biggest takeaway in this entire video. The current state of Pokemon Horizons is that we're in a stage of the anime where we're slowly building up the world the show exists in, adding more characters, new personality traits, and expanding upon the dynamics between each of the characters. In the moment, this may not feel like much, but I can almost guarantee you that everything we've seen in Pokemon Horizons lately has added to the strong foundation this series built, and we're going to see the benefits of this storytelling further down the line. Overall though, I'm really enjoying Horizons, and I hope you are too. The only thing left to do in this video is talk about the preview for the next episode, which is going to focus on Liko and Sprigatito. I had to do a double take that this wasn't actually episode 39, because my brain immediately recognized this as a very familiar looking story to the original episode 39, which saw our main character nearly say goodbye to their starter Pokemon. I think we'll get some similar development between Liko and Sprigatito this episode, and I am especially looking forward to learning more about Sprigatito's past, because I honestly have no clue what it could be. I hope you all enjoyed this video. It was definitely something different from my normal weekly reviews, but it allowed me to get most of my thoughts out about this series and catch me back up when it comes to reviews. I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to my channel. It'll make all the effort that went into writing a 25-page script and making an over 30-minute long video feel worth it. And be sure to leave a comment with your thoughts about Horizon thus far, or just tell me who you think is cuter between Dot's Tinkatink and Liko Satena. I'll see you guys next time.